Questions are being asked this morning about how much the security services knew about the two main suspects arrested over the murder of a soldier in Woolwich. MPs and peers will examine what was known about the two men who are under arrest in separate hospitals. 25-year-old drummer Lee Rigby from Greater Manchester was attacked and killed near the artillery barracks in south-east London on Wednesday.
And dramatic new pictures have emerged showing two suspects charging an armed police as they arrived at the scene. John Maguire reports.
Flowers in memory of a fallen soldier are an all too common sight at the gates of Britain's army bases, but this is different. Drummer Lee Rigby was killed not in some far-off land, but just yards away from the safety of his base. Most who've come to pay their respects are strangers, but strangers who've taken this personally.
It's just so vicious, so violent, and I don't know, I'm speechless. It's just cruel. That poor man.
It's absolutely horrific, utterly unbelievable. Our hearts and thoughts are with the families, with the family. We are with our Muslim friends and colleagues. This has absolutely nothing to do with them.
I was horrified. Couldn't believe it. You just don't expect something like that to happen close to where you live.
Soldiers continued to walk freely in and out of Woolwich barracks. Some had feared a retreat behind the fences and barbed wire, but less than 24 hours after their way of life had been attacked, uniforms were still worn in public view and with pride. For those who'd witnessed at close hand the shocking brutality of the day before, their accounts have been told and retold, yet still they struggle to comprehend what they saw.
I'm really scared, because my son, I normally let him come home on his own from school now, he's in year 5. Not now. I'm picking him up. I'm not going to let him come home on his own anymore. I'm too scared for him.
For many here, life may never be the same again, but there's a will to carry on as best they can. At the Woolwich Grand Theatre, a pre-arranged community concert went ahead last night, despite understandable concerns.
I thought seriously and hard and felt that we didn't want to call it off because that would send out the wrong signals. I think that, and also it's giving in to what people want or trying to achieve.
This is a bustling, diverse community, and the soldiers who live and work here are woven into the fabric of daily life. Wednesday's attack sought to tear that bond apart, but there's a deep and strong determination not to let that happen.
And that was John Maguire reporting. Well, more details are beginning to emerge of the two men who carried out the attack on Lee Rigby. Let's have a look at what we know about them so far. 28-year-old Michael Adebolajo was born in Lambeth in 1984 in what's been described as a devout Christian family. He moved to Romford in Essex and went to secondary school there, and following that a local sixth form college. Now, according to friends, he converted to Islam at some point in 2003, and soon after his family moved away from Essex to Saxilby in Lincolnshire. It was around this time that Mr. Adebolajo began attending meetings held by the band group Al Muhajirun. He's seen at a rally in 2007. Little is known about his actions over the past 5 years, but he's been described as becoming increasingly radicalized and at some point was investigated by MI5. There have been reports of him handing out extremist leaflets in Woolwich. This, of course, all before he carried out the brutal murder of the soldier at Woolwich Barracks on Wednesday. Now, much less is known about the other attacker, Michael Adebolajo. Police have said that he is 22 years old, lives in Greenwich. He too was also known to MI5, although he wasn't under investigation or surveillance at the time of the attack. Well, with me now, Shiraz Meher, who's a senior research fellow at King's College, who specialises in radicalism. Very good morning to you. Thank you for coming in. When we start to sketch a profile of these people, I'm not sure how much it helps, because inevitably the backgrounds are very different, aren't they?
And I think that's one of the things we've seen ever since September the 11th. Once you begin to put all the different people involved in terrorist attacks around the world into a database and start to look at them, there are actually no clear dynamics that come through. People come from all sorts of backgrounds, all kinds of walks of life. Some are converts, some were born into Muslim households, some come from impoverished backgrounds, some come from very well-off backgrounds. So it's very, very difficult to know how you begin to identify just what sets people on this path.
Is it possible, though, to look at the moment when somebody appears to divert from that path that we were originally describing and for whatever reason then becomes radicalised? Is there something there that is in common for people?
Well, people often go through a pattern of extremist activity and extremist association before moving into violent extremism. We don't know what the tipping point is and why some people choose to stay extremist and radical and why other people migrate into terrorism. But of course, organizations like the one you mentioned, Al-Muhajirun, which have been banned, these networks still exist, they're still active to all intents and purposes, and they continue to radicalize people. In essence, they're a gateway organization into this underbelly, this underworld of very radical and extremist activity. And I think the government really has to start to look into how you effectively dismantle these networks, because without that, you remove a big factor in the migration of people.
But can you dismantle them? Because particularly now via the internet, all manner of rather less clear-cut relationships can be struck up between people if they are determined enough to pursue a particular point of view.
There are always these virtual networks. So Al-Qaeda has web forums, people go online, and there is clearly an element of internet radicalization that takes place and virtual radicalization. But more often than not, that radicalization, in some cases, it does happen entirely online. But to a large extent, there is still a real-world activity and real-world interactions that take place. So by tackling that side of things, we can begin to damp down some of the pressures.
And if those kind of connections are going on, that is the opportunity, if you like, for the security services to even keep an eye on those who are not part of some rather wider, more publicised group, presumably.
Well, I think there's been this case with the security service where they've allowed certain people to exist as clerical honeypots. And by leaving them at large, as it were, they begin to build a picture of who the network is around them, who these people are, and so on. But as we've seen in this case, and we've seen so many times in the past as well, you can't effectively monitor everybody, and sometimes people slip through the cracks. And we have tragedies like the one we had on Wednesday. So actually, that policy as well needs to be revisited, and I think people need to ask serious questions about what the utility is of allowing activity like this to continue, because we're not always able to follow up on it.
Interesting phrase you use, clerical honeypot. What do you mean by that specifically?
Well, we've traditionally had preachers like Omar Bakr Muhammad, he's no longer here, but Anjum Chowdhury, it's inconceivable to me that he is still walking the streets as a free man. And I think a lot of people asking that question, why is he not in jail right now? And he is someone who is radicalized or been on the periphery of lots of things. So there is an argument, and there has been a view within parts of Whitehall, within parts of the establishment, that by allowing these people to exist at large, you can look at their networks, look who's around them, and build lists and names of people. But too often people fall through the cracks, and I think that policy must be revisited.
Okay. Sure, Mayor. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. Thank you.
Now let's just return to Heathrow, because the aircraft